Welcome to Untethered to Rooted, a podcast that brings you a collection of stories around grief, healing, and identity. Hear from everyday people how grief and loss shape their identity and how their identity shapes the way they heal and process grief. I'm your host, Dana Daugherty, a licensed psychotherapist with extensive experience dealing with grief, both personally and professionally. And if you want to hear stories with gems and practical tools for healing, stay tuned for more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Today, we'll be exploring sibling loss and how to speak about grief with kids. Our guest today comes with professional and personal experience with grief. And specifically for Melissa Braunworth, when she was 29, her younger brother, Bryant, was 25 when he was diagnosed with advanced stage cancer, 2 weeks before she got engaged. And Melissa walked alongside her brother.
2 weeks after engaged.
Oh, thank you. Good correction.
Yes.
2 weeks after she was engaged. Also, super, life event, right?
Yeah.
And Melissa walked alongside her brother for 2 years in treatment until he passed away at 27 years old. And lots of life events occurred while she was actively in grief. She was growing her family and working with kids, and she's spoken to her own kids about grief and helping them integrate grief language into their own lives. She has had multiple experiences with walking alongside kids, experiencing the impact of death, loss, and grief. Melissa recognizes that kids develop a language of emotion through play and creative expression, and teenagers also find self-discovery through the creative arts, such as music, writing, and visual art. So she aims to work from this perspective. And so, with a more formal introduction, and by way of introduction, Melissa Braunworth is a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. She has spent over a decade working with children and adolescents, parents and caregivers, school teachers, and staff to provide supportive therapeutic care. She specializes in working with adolescents, kids, young adults, and perinatal and postpartum moms in the areas of ADHD, grief and loss, trauma, perinatal, postnatal mental health, and deconstruction and reconstructing faith. Prior to becoming a licensed therapist, Melissa spent a decade in volunteer and paid roles working with young adults. She loved getting to walk alongside young adults facing issues of identity, career, value-based decision-making, relationship formation, and spiritual identity. She tailors therapy, engaging her clients' interests, allowing them to explore their inner world through verbal talk therapy and nonverbal creative expressive ways. Melissa is a mom to 3 kids, a spouse, a sister, native to the Bay Area, eldest daughter, and first-generation Asian-American U.S. dweller. Also a note that anything that Melissa says today is for educational purposes and does not constitute therapy or therapeutic advice. And does that sound familiar? I hope so, because similarly for our podcast, we also have this podcast for educational purposes, and it does not constitute therapy or therapeutic advice. Also, Melissa and I decided to match our backgrounds, which I absolutely love.
Yes.
As well. So, Melissa, welcome today. I'm so glad that you are here. And I just want to start asking you this question I ask all of my guests, which is, what are some identities that are important to you? Can you just socially locate yourself for our audience? Yeah.
Yes. And thank you for having me and hyping me up. I'm like, wow, I sound really great.
You are really
coming
great.
Out of your mouth. So I love it. I'm like, when am I having a bad day? I'm just going to put you on replay and be like, oh, wait, that is also part of me. Because, we all have those days where we're like, I am not feeling so hot. So thank you for that. I know. So let's see, different parts of my life. I think first and foremost, which is really, I never thought I would identify myself this way, but I do feel like a large part of my brain is motherhood. To my 3 little babies, I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And a lot of it has gone into their, physical and emotional well-being, as well as their spiritual well-being as well. I think I've thought about how I grew up, and, our parents try to do everything right. And I do believe that, especially now as I'm a parent, I'm like, okay, when you said that you're doing everything the best that you could, I believe it. And I also think that there's some things that I decided along the way that I'm like, you know what? I don't think I want to repeat these patterns. And I want to try something new for our family.
Sure.
I'm sure my kids will say the same when they're my age too. So I feel like being a mother is one part of me. I think another part of me that I've only recently started to experience, maybe this is more like a midlife thing, but I discovered that I could go back to my creativity, which I had as a child. So as a child, I loved drawing. I love like all the artsy stuff. I love writing. And then at some point in some time, I decided that wasn't going to be a viable career, or like not enough attention would be put to it, because I think the sciences and math were all really valued growing up. And so I felt like these parts of myself I had to shrink, or I just didn't want to be that awkward kid that was really into liberal arts.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of did it on the side, like choir and various things, but it was more like I do choir. Or I actually really like art, but don't tell anyone because I don't want to be associated with that. And now I'm like, no, those things are actually really beautiful. And I think a lot of approaching middle age is coming back to our childhood selves and giving ourselves the permission to like engage in things that like we were curious in. So I've taken up pottery on the wheel, which is so good for stress. It's like my meditative practice.
Wow.
So I love that. I've started like drawing again and like writing to kind of center me and help me get all my feelings out. And I've also seen that translate to my kids too, because I'll have them like write or draw when they're like upset or have big feelings. So I think like mother, artist, and then I think just being a human. And I know that sounds really funny to say, but gosh, I think I'm realizing being human is a really hard job.
Yeah.
And it comes with all the big things. It's like, oh, will I allow myself to go there? Will I allow myself to actually like be like, I don't want to do this today, and this is really hard, and that's okay because I'm a limited person? Or like I totally blew up at my kid and that was not my finest moment and I need to go repair. I think when you're growing up, I don't know if we're so integrated in our bodies in the way that we think of our humanness. It's more like, I can do everything or I can't do anything. And then our parents are superheroes. And then we're just like off and away. And I think becoming an adult, it's like, oh gosh, now I'm seeing my limitations. Or now I know that like this perfection that I see that, so-and-so has is like, maybe that's good for them, but maybe that doesn't mean I need to strive to that standard. So I think I'm learning to be okay with being human, which is all the things that come with humanness, is like not perfection, with having a really messy, sometimes chaotic life. And then how do I find peace in that? That's like a working goal of mine, is like, if things are going to be chaotic and always crazy, how can I find peace within that? Because I think that is part of the human experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing that and just recognizing your own humanity, and also just seeing creative expression as a way to be able to ground yourself in your own humanity and connection with your kids as well. And to make sense of things that are not as concrete or abstract, like all the emotions that we have. So yeah, all important things that you share. And I'm wondering, just for I obviously I gave an intro, but I'm curious, what's your connection with this topic today about sibling loss and about talking about grief with kids? I'd love for you to share.
Sure. So way before I became a therapist or knew I was going to be a therapist, I was in a young adult group where we met every Friday, and I met this girl named Christine, and she was so sweet and so lovely, and she was older than me, and she was diagnosed with cancer, a very, very rare sarcoma. And I remember going to one of her doctor's appointments with her and her receiving bad news, and then me trying to like process that with her, but I really didn't know what to say. And I was also a younger young adult. I think I was in my like early 20s. And so I felt like growing up as a kid and even, into young adult, I never had a good relationship with loss. I was always afraid of losing people close to me, but it wasn't something people talked about. And I remember attending funerals of like grandparents or other people in our community, but it was always this kind of like dissociative experience. Or what I mean, it's like I'm experiencing it and I feel it, but I'm kind of holding it away from me because it's so scary. And I was kind of like living in this world where I just don't want to lose anybody, and I don't want to talk about scary things, because if I talk about it, maybe it will happen or maybe it will come true. So this is kind of the backdrop leading to that. And so Christine having cancer, and then, we kind of lost touch. I was much more interested in like my boy drama and everything else at the time, and then when I found out that she had passed away, that was really jarring for me in the sense of like, I realized, I don't think I was that great of a friend. I wanted to be a better friend, but I think I was so scared of death and loss and grief that I just kind of distanced myself from it and decided I would just like avoid it instead of like confront it and my feelings towards it, or at least make a conscious decision of like, I don't have capacity for this right now. And I'm really sorry. Let's have this conversation. And so when she died, I vowed to myself, I'm not going to do that again. If I ever encounter this situation, I'm going to be all in and I'm going to be present, because I felt really guilty that I wasn't. And so my brother was diagnosed, like you had mentioned, 2 weeks after I got engaged. Yeah, he was diagnosed with advanced stage cancer, actually. So it caught us so by surprise. His only symptom was back pain, like debilitating back pain. And all these doctors, well, not all these doctors, but like a Eastern doctor who was like Western trained, and then his own primary care doctor and his PT were all like, you just play basketball, so must be a muscle injury. No. Yeah, and it was my mom who was like, he can't walk. I think he needs an MRI. And that's when they found out he had full-blown cancer that had already gone to all of his organs. It was a total shock for our family. We were like, what? Yeah. This is like not even in our mind at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. That sounds like a total shock.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah. And 25, so young. So that all was like brewing 25, 24 maybe, and then 27, and then it was basically like, all right, let's actively go through treatment. And then it was like,
yeah, it was very like, at first the prognosis was like, oh, great, you got this like gold mine of cancers. They were like, it's testicular cancer. If you want to get a cancer, this is a good one, except hers was like a specific non-germ cell seminoma cancer. And apparently his was the kind that kept growing back. So no matter what they did, it would keep going back. So even though we went to different places to try to treat him, we went to Indiana University, we went to MD Anderson, we were at El Camino, we were at Stanford, what things most people do, look at clinical trials and various things, like his just kept coming back. So 2 years of trying to treat. Wow. And then we realized like it just wasn't going to be a curable one. And then it was about comfortability and learning how do you say goodbye in the best way possible, knowing that like you're going to be an only sibling and you're going to have to take care of your parents and all the grief that comes along with that. I was like only 29, in grad school. And I remember thinking like, man, am I going to have to be like a therapist that actually goes through stuff, or can I just be altruistically like, helping people along the side? Because that's what I thought.
Like that. Yeah.
I know, right? We're all like that. We're like, we're going to save the world and let's sit like approximate to pain, but we don't have to like inherit it for ourselves. That was like my, my mid-20s thinking. And I had hoped that would play out that way, but that obviously didn't happen. And so I walked with my brother for those 2 years and being able to process with him, what does it look like to live? What does it look like to live while you're dying? How do we have these conversations with ourselves, with, my spouse? We were like newly married at the time. What does it look like to have that with my parents? And then what does it look like to have with young adult friends? Because his cancer diagnosis and death also disrupted all my friend circles, because that was one of their first friends that also was going through something so traumatic. And also to bring in the element of faith, the Christian faith community was also like, wait, this is not what we expected. Like, we're praying. What? Do you need to pray more? Like, it just brought up all these different things that people might say in church as an attempt, now I see, to like gain some sort of control over things that we don't always have control over. And so when he passed, that was 1 month before I started my traineeship for grad school. I got pregnant a year after he died, and then my
Okay.
daughter, who actually just turned 10,
Oh.
she was born right around his second death anniversary or heaven anniversary, however you like to call it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how do you like to call it?
You know, I haven't quite figured out what I want to call it. I call it probably like Bryant Day, but I usually say death
Yeah.
anniversary, but like Bryant Day, death anniversary, because I'm like, it's death. It is death. Like, it is sad. Like, yes, we believe and hope he's in heaven. I actually do think he is, based on like some miraculous thing that happened after he died. But I also am like, yeah, it was pretty crazy actually.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he passed, and then 2 months later, I'm in my first elementary school. And I'm like, I remember telling my supervisor, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm still in grad school. I'm trying to get hours and learn how to do this therapy thing. And I just remember it was like, well, you're kind of sad and they're sad. Just like be with sad. And so I was placed with kids.
Sad.
Yeah, I was with kids who were sad. Like they had lost parents, whether it was like, through actual physical loss, or, their parent was in another country, or like their parent, they never met them. They only had one parent because the other parent left after they were born. And so it was just a lot of kids and I just sitting around in this kind of lost felt sense of like, we're together in our sad. And it's through the being that we're able to find comfort. Not really like this is this programmatic road that you go to, but we're just going to sit and be together and like wade through this together. And so I think that was really formative. And then I kept doing that, not knowing if therapy was for me, but I found myself drawn to these kids with these experiences. And they were like, no one really talked to me about it. And I got to I have kids that come to my mind of like, I walked them through their parents' cancer diagnosis and then death and after. Or I helped, high schoolers process really traumatic events that happened to their friends, which ended in death, but they had never told anyone else about. And I felt like I have a space at this table that I don't want to be in. No one wants to be on this side. No one wants to be at this table. Let's be honest. Yeah. We all rather be at the table where we haven't experienced loss.
For sure.
But now that I'm at the table, I'm like, I want to provide a safe space for other people, especially kids, because they have a whole different type of language. And I feel like as adults, we kind of fumble with like, how do we talk to our kids about death? Because I feel like it's a very taboo subject that not everybody wants to talk about. And so because of that, I saw it in my profession, all these things. And then my classmate, Michael, passed away in a boating accident, like maybe a year or two after my brother. And then his best friend, his wife, who was also his best friend, Michelle, unfortunately, she died by suicide. And then a few years later, one of my really good friends and former supervisors, her son was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he was only in kindergarten. And so another loss and another sadness. And all these losses I felt like stemmed back to the very first loss with my brother. Yeah, like being newly married and getting a home and then getting pregnant all aside while grieving. And you almost feel like you live life in reverse because, as like all my friends and his friends are like, okay, we're like finding our spouse and like we're building our career and we're buying homes and getting pets and growing our family. I'm having conversations with my brother about like, what does it mean to love well? What does it mean to die well? Knowing that you can't take everything behind. And then like, how do we move through grief? Like we talked about what it might look like after he was gone, shed a lot of tears over that. And then I'm the one that's like looking at plots and thinking like, where will your final resting place be? Where will my parents be? And, having that knowledge like in reverse. So like it's because it was an out of time death. So like my friends who have parents that are like going through illness and death, they'll ask me what it was like. And I'm like, oh yeah, I already went through that like 12 years ago. So I feel like I'm old. Like I feel like I'm 80 inside, but I also feel like, I'm like 80, but I'm not 80. It's both.
Yeah.
My bones feel 80.
Yeah.
In so many more ways than one.
I know. I'm like, my ligaments, my tendons.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, is that middle age?
Yeah. It totally is.
Yeah. But yeah, on top of it, I believe that grief also ages you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's both. It's like, yes, as we grow older physically, we also emit like the emotional impact and the holding of loss and grief also ages you. And yeah, it just, you hold a lot of complex things all at once. And
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking to kids is so different because with kids,
right,
they can just be sad and just cry. Like they're sad. Like you have my little toddler is sad because, he wants me to do something, an action before another action, or something's not like the right color or whatever. And he can just like fall apart at it. Or even my older kid, is like, well, that wasn't fair, and burst out crying. But I feel like as adults, we're conditioned to like, not like to triage our emotions into these like little tubes where it becomes now okay in this area, then we get to pour it out. Or like, but by this person, we get to pour it out. And we just have that filter. So it takes a lot more work to be like, how do I undo the filter so I can actually feel what I need to feel? Do I feel safe enough to do it? Is it with the people that I want to do this with? Do I want to be alone? Like, there's so many factors, I think, that go into how do we grieve as an adult or as a parent versus a kid. They're just like, I'm sad. It's all coming out. And they're looking to us to co-regulate with them, right? So I just feel like there's more freedom as a child that they have. And it's like, can the adult show up and like help them work through their feelings? I think that's more of the ask for us as adults versus like, because their feelings are already there. We're just here to help them make sense of it.
Yes, 100%. And also I think there's a lot of wisdom in learning from kids as well, of just like, allowing us to sort of shed all the complexity of like really intellectualizing grief. Because I think that like, I know myself, that's where I like kind of went.
Totally.
And I was like, my therapist early on in my acute grief, I was like, I'm gonna get A+ in grieving. I was just, there's no A+ in grieving or therapy. But I was just like, I'm gonna do this well, and I'm gonna honor the grief so well that like I'm not gonna make this complex at all, right? Yeah. And
or like go to this corner or schedule this time to grieve. I remember one of the I think it might have been a therapist told me, he's like, some people just have to like say at 3:00 I'm gonna cry. I'm like, I can't do that. Like I can't just manufacture it. It just happens at different points.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and this is the thing, grief is so different for every person. I know that like I think I tried everything. I was like, I think I did. Like, okay, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna try to have my grief in the morning in the shower, let it all wash down, like wash into the drain, and then I'm gonna start my day. And that's I'm gonna like put like some time limits on my grief because I have to move about my day,
Totally.
And then other times I was like, this is just like leaking, kind of like the kids, where it's just like it's leaking out of me, and I'm just like, all right, like. In some ways, I do need to embrace grief like a child,
Yes.
And really actually speak to, because all those like younger selves of me also like, were grieving the loss of my mom, and it's such a big one, so as well, all of them are big, but that was just such a big thing to just think about too. It's just like, how do you release all of that too?
But I also, it made me really find space of like, I want this to be talked about. And especially for siblings, I felt a huge part of that because when my brother was sick, I went on Amazon or Googled like, can you find me a sibling loss book? And there were maybe 2. And that wasn't enough for me. And then I looked for something that was faith-based, and it was really hard to find because let's just say Jesus-y people don't do grief quite well. Not all people, but a lot of them don't. It's just weird. Yeah. It's just weird. Let's just call it. They're just weird. And
there's a fear of talking about death. Isn't that wild?
It is. It is. Or there's like, we just jump to like, and they're in heaven, praise Jesus. Or like, they're not suffering anymore, or everyone dies. And it's
spiritual bypassing.
Yes. And it's like, that's not really that helpful when you have to stare at the empty seat next to you every day, or at that birthday they're not going to be there.
Hmm. Yeah, wow, Melissa. I think what really strikes me the most about what you were saying was kind of the juxtaposition of holding these grief experiences with adults and the awkwardness around it and the fear around it versus when you were talking about holding grief with kids and just like how simple it sort of was to just like be with the sad and it's just going to be expressed. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about just like it's almost like, do we overcomplicate grief as we get older? Like what is happening with us as adults that we're like weird? We also like, even if you are like have a faith, does it get awkward in your faith too to talk about death as well and loss?
Yeah, I think coming from like both perspectives, like I would say, for example, when I think about adults, or they will, after my brother died, it would almost be like at the beginning they would check in, like, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then now they'll ask me, like, how are your parents doing? But it's a lot, I have had a much fewer people say to me, like, how are you doing? Unless it's a specific date. Like they know Brian's death anniversary is coming up. Then they'll be like, oh, I'm thinking about you today. But generally it's like the parents, or it doesn't even come up. When in your mind, you're like, it's Christmas. I'm missing this person that's supposed to be here. And so there's kind of like this little dance around topic where it doesn't even occur to them to bring it up, or maybe they want to bring it up and they don't know how to bring it up, so it just doesn't come up. And then you're sitting here being like, no one is remembering this person but me, and it feels extremely lonely. And I think that's so much, and I don't think we even consciously are aware that all this is going on in our brain. It's just more like, it's this season, or it's like some innocuous event. It's like July 4th, and we usually gather as a family, or these are when our friends gather, and oh, that person isn't here. Okay, and you as the person who lost knows that, but everyone else may not, and they're just like in their little zone. I think for kids it's so different in a way of how they view it as well. Like obviously as a therapist, like I would have my little playroom, like I'm thinking about the littles, like the elementary school kids, and they would come in. And like, if I knew they had a loss, it may not come up right away, but then we'll like be playing in sand, or, they'll be in the dollhouse, or they'll have like some dinosaurs, and then they're starting to interact. We'll just play. And then they'll be like doing like some like mimicking of like, you always leave me and I can never find you. And it's this loop that we play out until it works out of their system. So they're not telling me, hey, when I was little, I was adopted and I never met my parents. But it comes out in the house play of like the adults in the situation. They will make me find them always, but then they'll always go hide. And it's like, come find me. I can't find you. And it gets played out. Or I remember I had another child who was like in the sand and just started crying. And it was like, we were moving from somewhere. And then it was like, so-and-so died and I just really miss them, and they're in the sand and they're bawling their eyes out, and then it's like it's out, and then it's like, okay, well, now I want to go play with this. And it's a very fluid interaction. I feel like it's like if they're not open to it, I can tell, and then we wait and we sit, and I think with presence they become more comfortable, or they'll be like, wait a minute, this happened to you? Can you tell me about it? Mm-hmm. So I know as therapists, like, depends on your philosophy, but there's a lot of like, we don't disclose things about ourselves. It's all about the client. But I think for kids, I've learned like I'm more open in the sense of like, if I know a kid has lost somebody, I might say like, you know what? I also lost someone, and it is really hard, isn't it? And I remember these things. Does this resonate with you? And it's like this whole door that opens up where they'll be like, oh yeah. And I'm like, it's like this, or it's hard for me to access this. And it depends like what age they are. The little kids, they play. The older kids, if it's harder to access, I remember sometimes I would be like, okay, maybe you can't put words to it. Maybe you can't even write it. So I'm like, do you have like songs you can play for me? And so we would do a lot of songs where they'll put on songs from YouTube that I have never heard before. And they are tragically sad. And we will just sit and listen to them. And then afterwards, I'll be like, what do you like about that song? Or we'll make like, I'll bring like magazines or like collages. And I'll be like, can you put together what your grief might look like or what things look like? And just pick any picture that sticks to you. And we'll play the songs in the background. So it's very like right-brained kind of thinking. And then we'll put it out. And then maybe each week we'll talk a little bit about it. And then we'll talk about other stuff. Because I notice like kids, they kind of like do this. It's like I put it down and I pick it up. I put it down and I pick it up. And then for us as an adult, I feel like sometimes it's more like hot potato. Like I pick it up. I don't want it. Throw it away. Right. Or do I pass it off to somebody else? Versus, again, it depends on the kid. But I think the kid in the right condition, in a trusting environment with a trusted person, I think they want someone to hold their story. They want someone to make sense of everything. And I feel like as adults, if we had someone to like help us make sense of everything, whether we agreed to it or not, or but just had that consistent presence to be like, hey, you're kind of grumpy right now. You know, I get into this with my spouse. He's like, I know this pattern. I'm like, what pattern? He's like, well, it's about that time of the year, you know, when these anniversaries come up and, you know, I know you're getting really fixated on doing this sort of thing or this kind of thing. And he's like, I've seen this cycle before. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I'm like, oh, you're right. I had a sad, we call it a sad. I had a sad, or I'm like, my sad is stuck. I need to figure out how to like work it out of my system.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like just such good information you shared about just like, first of all, I'm really struck by, that's so right, just the fluidity of kids being able to like, I mean, it's almost like this is sort of how we were like naturally wired before we overcomplicated it, you know?
Yes.
It's just like having it come up and then like express the sad and then being able to like move on to the next thing. And then it comes up in waves, and that's like the natural pattern of this. And you're right, it's like I like your description of like as adults it's almost like a hot potato. I was also thinking it's almost like we have the sad and then we like compartmentalize it somehow. We like take it and we're just like, I'm not gonna think about this right now during this specific time, and then at this other specific time I will like unlock it, and then I'll allow myself to do this thing, which is it is something, you know, obviously learned, because that's not necessarily probably what you see with kids who are like, oh, I'm just going to like put this away at this time, and that's obviously like a learned habit. So yeah.
And I feel like they're very honest too. It'll be like I'll kind of like go that way, and they'll tell me like, I don't really want to talk about that right now. I'm like, okay, cool. Or like, well, I can tell if they're like, maybe I want you to ask me more questions or find a creative way to kind of approach it. And I think as adults, it's a lot harder to be like, you know what? I don't really want to talk about it right now. Or can you ask me about that? I feel like kids are a lot more open, or they just want to be like, whoa, like my kids will be like, something just crazy happened and I just like want to tell you, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll like reference point what it is. Or I remember, and this is like a memory that comes to my mind is, again, the difference in kids. We were going to school one day. We were like late for school. I remember I was pushing my youngest in the stroller. My oldest one is like backpack on, just like jets by. And then my middle one, he like stops fresh in his tracks. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, why are we stopping? We got to go to school. And right in front of the stroller is this like horribly looking sad animal that is definitely not alive anymore. It was super, super sad. And he was just like horrified. And I was like, oh, my oldest just took off running, didn't see it, which is okay. My middle one notices a lot of things. He saw it, and then we had to be very careful and go around it. And then for the rest of the day, he had lots of questions. Like, is that still there? Like, what do I do? Like, why does it look like that? Do you think anyone took care of it afterwards? And it was like, oh, I think we forget how jarring it is, too, to see something not in its natural form. Like, the nitty-gritty details of what death looks like. Bryant told me, he's like, Melissa, death is kind of ugly. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I'm like, but what if it can be beautiful? And like in my experience of it, it is beautiful, but it's also really ugly because it's the lifelessness, it's the loss. And depending on how the person died or an animal died, it's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's really traumatic. And I think being able to name that too,
Yeah.
like puts language to it. So you're not like, I'm not crazy. It is
Yeah.
kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Just being able to name those things and also name their reaction to those things and recognize that like death, while it's a natural thing and also unnatural, it's natural and unnatural. It's that weird paradox of like,
Totally.
being like, it feels like, this shouldn't be, and also it is. And how do you face it? And it's really interesting what kind of, I'm thinking about what your middle child was actually saying about just the questions that come up, like, was this animal taken care of, like, who do we like. I think about those are kind of questions that come up as we speak, like with clients about grief and
Yeah.
the people that we've lost, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
where do we think they are now, like,
Yep.
were they taken care of, do you think they were in pain, like all these questions
Totally.
that come up that are also, they're like almost childlike, but they are still like all these questions that come up for adults, I think, that are very similar to what come up for kids, of just this
Totally.
question around and this curiosity. I think we just don't talk about death enough,
Yep.
and it's also probably why we have a lot of questions around it too.
Yeah, it's really interesting for your listeners. So, in the town that I am at, the library actually promotes this thing that I'm like, whoa, they call it Death Cafe. It's really interesting. And
Yes.
it's a death doula, I believe, that
Mhm.
gathers people in a very informal, chill setting. They said over like beverages and snacks, but to engage in conversations around death so it kind of destigmatizes
Mm.
what it could look like.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I haven't visited one yet, but I'm like, I kind of want to because I want to
Mm.
see like how it's approached in a very different way. And I know we haven't mentioned this yet, but I also think there's a huge cultural component to why, death is so scary to talk about. I don't know. I think Western
Yeah.
culture, especially, is like, it's just not a thing that we bring up. Like
Mm.
weddings, babies, all these things are things that we like celebrate. But I think like the hard times that are written in history, the things that have happened, there are like memorials and things that do happen, but it's like, how do we as people remember? Do we bring up these things? Or especially as parents, I've talked to other parents and they're like, oh no, I read this book to my kid and has a turtle dying in it and I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Or I remember, when one of our neighbors unexpectedly passed away, I processed it with each of my kids and I was like, hey, I just want you to know, this happened to, our neighbor. And, I wanted them to make sense of why they're not seeing this person as a regular part of their life anymore. I mean, they still are part of their societal daily circle.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my little kids took it to his school and said, oh, yeah, so and so died. And the teacher was like, oh, wait, he shouldn't share that because not everyone has talked to their kids about death. And I was like, oh. I'm like, that's a different perspective because I'm hoping that all parents would feel empowered to at least have basic conversation of what that
Well,
looks like.
yeah, and so actually, Melissa, I think that's actually a question a lot of our listeners would have. A lot of listeners, especially who are parents, is like, some people are like, I don't know, how do I have this conversation with kids? How do I have the conversation around death, around loss? How do I talk about it when it comes up? Like, how do I even approach it? What would, like, I'm curious what you would say about that.
Okay. Now I'm going to try to think about it in different categories. So the first one is like, it's just like a pre-introduction. I don't want to say like a Costco sample, but let's just use the food for funsies. Let's say it's a Costco sample, like they haven't had the actual thing, it's never happened in their family, but the parents want them to be informed. I'll put that as the first category. I think the second category is they didn't do the Costco sample, but now they're just eating the whole thing and they've actually experienced death. And they're like, oh no, I never prefaced. And now this unexpected thing has happened.
Mm.
Now what do I do? And then I would say the third thing is more like a collective global thing. So let's say there's like a huge earthquake or there's a huge event somewhere, or like when COVID happened and now it's happening everywhere, and now adults and kids are all freaking out because no one has any answers. Like, what do we do then in there? So does it help if I break it up into these three
please.
categories?
I think that's great.
Okay, so when I think about like the Costco sample, like the first little taste of what it would look like, first I think you take into account like the kid's age and their level of interest or whatever. Like, so like very easily, like if I think about if you're starting for very little kids, like I really like books, and maybe I can find some to put in the show notes for your listeners so they can find like easy entry points. One of my favorites that someone had gifted me after my brother died, and I use it all the time now, it's called The Invisible String. And it talks about like how we're all connected in the heart, even if people are far apart. And there's a one section that says, you know, even when this person's in heaven, that's if you believe in heaven, but I like how it kind of paints this idea of we're not always together, but we're still connected. And so that's like a very gentle intro. And then for my kids, what I did, beside like I started taking them to visit my brother very early on, to visit him at the memorial park. You know, I wanted them to see like what things looked like, and they would ask me questions. They would be like, what's that hole for? Or why are they wearing black clothes? And then I could kind of try to say like, oh, this is what some people might wear when they're really sad. Or these are the people who help taking care of the garden. This is what the tractor is for, because people are buried inside, in a very like non-charge kind of way, but more like, you can ask me questions. This is just kind of basics. And then I think for us, it was, you know, we have a cat, and our cat loves bringing presents. If anyone has a cat, they will know what presents means, which means any little furry or small thing with tails, they will bring back as a present. So we have had birds and salamanders and lizards all come through our house. Maybe not salamanders, lizards. And sometimes they don't come all intact. Sometimes they come and they are pretty injured, and then they're going to die. And then sometimes they're just unfortunately dead. And so very early on, I was like, do I expose my kid? Do I think they're ready? And I was like, no, I want my kid to see the difference between a bird that's alive and a bird that is not. So we would talk about like, so what's different about this bird that you see? And it's okay to be scared. I always give them an option. Like, do you want to see it? Do you not want to see it? So ask their permission. But if you do, mommy will be right here, and I'll try to answer any questions that you might have. So if it's like the bird, I'll be like, do you want to see it? They'll be like, yes or no. One of mine would say yes. And then one would be like, maybe. And one would be like, definitely not. I'm like, okay. Then we would approach the animal, and then we'll be like, what do you notice? Like, can it breathe? What looks different about it? And then for us, like we would have this little ritual where like, we're going to have this little spot in the yard where we bury it. And I'd be like, we'll cover it up and we'll like, thank it. We'll be like, thank you for having a nice life. We're really sorry that our cat like ate you or like harmed you, and like I hope you have a good rest of your life wherever you are. So kind of like a little thing to say goodbye to it. And so I felt like that was like an easier introduction for when they're really little. And I think even when you're older, you know, they might read it in a book, like, what does death mean? Or why is everyone sad? Then you can start having like older engaging conversations that are still very open-ended, and let the kid kind of lead you. Like, oh, when you hear that, what does it make you think of? Is that something that you're interested in? Is it something that scares you? Why might that scare you? What do you think about the adults that you see around you as they are also hearing this news? Do you look to them, and are you worried that you have to take care of them? Do they also look scared? So you're also scared because it doesn't look like anyone knows what's going on? You know? So that's a like very brief Costco sample sizes, and then mix with maybe some education, like I've done with my kids. Like, dead means that you can't breathe anymore. You can't hug the person anymore. Their essence is not there. Their body is there. It's kind of like a shell, but like the essence of who they are, their spirit is not there anymore. And so that's kind of how we started. And then for kids who have actively lost, so with our kids, when our neighbors, we had two neighbors suddenly pass away, how we told them, I sat them all down. I was like, okay, I have some sad news to tell you. It might be kind of hard, but we're here to help you process. And we would say like, Mr. John passed away or Uncle Reuben passed away, I wouldn't go into all the details because I didn't think that was necessary for them. But I would be like, how do you feel? I remember one time they just like burst out laughing because they didn't know what to do. It was like so uncomfortable. They're like, ha ha ha, which is, you would think it's kind of an awkward response, but I'm like, oh, I think that's what the body does when it's nervous. It's like, we just laugh. We're just like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, you know what? That's okay. And if you want to talk, they're like, do you want to talk about it more? Nope. I'm like, okay, we'll come to it later. And then I find them later looking very sad and not talking. Or with the other one, they're like, yeah, let's talk about it or let's not. And they could either talk, or I would have them do this little exercise where I'm like, you know, let's just get some paper out. Or they would get their little journals out. I'm like, here are some colors. I'm like, we're just going to take whatever color you feel and you're just going to color the page. And you get to say what it is. So they're like blue or black or red. And they don't even have to have a language for sad or angry or mad or scared. Like, we might be able to provide that. We may not be able to provide that. But it puts it on the page. So like, this is how I'm feeling. And then we kind of talk about that. Like, this is all the things that are brewing inside. And then what are the questions that you have about like this thing? And this is like if it's a farther away kind of thing. If it's in the family and it's immediate, like it's like the big one is like death of a parent. That's like very unexpected. Death of a sibling, death of a friend. These are all approached, I think, in different ways. Yeah. And I think for things like that, I honestly would suggest that they find like a therapist or like a group. I know for churches, they have something called Grief Share. You might be able to find a local grief group in your community, or there are people that specialize in grief. I think losses that are so big like that, you can have conversations with your kids. And I also think it's really good to have a person working alongside of you as well. Because even for myself, as a therapist, I definitely have a therapist because I need someone to help me process my grief. I can't do it by myself. And I would be foolish to think that I could. Yeah. Okay. And then the last category, which is like this catastrophic event. So I'll take COVID, for example, or like there have recently been fires. And so they'll see like, oh, there's fires in the news, or I have kids be like, my parents didn't know, but I saw this newspaper thing or the news, and there was like, there's bombing in my country. Yeah. And so what I'll notice is they may not tell, if they're older, they may not say anything, but they might be more clingy. So they're like, I want to be at home, or they might ask for more reassurance more often. Like, where are you going? Like, who's going to be there? And so it might not always look like what you think. It might be like they just want to be around more, or they might be more clingy, or they might be more like upset and angry because they don't know what's going on. And then so some of the conversations I would have is like, did you hear about XYZ? If they're like, yeah, then I'm like, okay, where did you hear it? What did you learn about it? What kind of like questions do you have? Or I might be like, well, I heard it too, and it made mommy feel kind of scared because I don't really know what's happening either. And there are a lot of people that aren't. And so we're all kind of figuring this out. And then I'll be like, but as far as I know, mommy is going to do my best to try to keep you safe. I can't always do that, but I'm going to try my best to like help you along. And when you get scared, you can talk to me. And then I love the Mr. Rogers look for the helpers, but I'm always like, I have to do that to myself. I'm like, remember that you're not the only one that has to take care of it. I was like, there are doctors, there are nurses, there are people that are trying to all work for the good. Because I think, let's be honest, in this world right now, there are a lot of things that are going cray-cray. Oh, yeah. And I think even as adults, I have to like tell myself, my anxious self, like, this doesn't all rest on your shoulders. Right. You're not the only one. Right. Like, there is scaffolding, there is a hug, there is a snug for you. Because I think that's what grief does. It honestly makes you feel like you are in some ocean, treading water. The waves are like flapping you up on the head. And you're like, do I lay on my back and try to float? It's not working. Okay, I'm going to go to the front. Now I'm on the side and I can't see anybody near me. And I think that's what freaks us out a lot because we're looking for like reassurance, support. And I know like a lot of therapists will say, or pastors or spiritual leaders will be like, well, you just look within or you access God. And I'm gonna be real honest. I'm like, sometimes in that state, you cannot access nothing. You are freaking out.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
just need like a hand or reassurance, or
Yeah.
like sometimes we just can't do it by ourselves and we think we
For
can
sure.
and we can't. And that's
Yeah.
okay to say. Like, I'm all for, like, if you got that inner mantra, I'm all for that. Bless you. And if you have your stuffies, I'm like all for the comfort objects because that's great.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't have them. And sometimes, like, you know, we need someone to be like, I got you. Like, here, like, I see that you're not doing okay and I love you. Let's, like, help you find the support that you need. And it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
Even though it's scary to bring that up with someone. And they might be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But at least you've kind of like made a ripple to be like, I love you and I care about you. And I'm actually so grateful for the people in my life who are like, you look really sad or you're not living.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm not.
Yeah. 100%. I think that sometimes what can happen with death and loss and even witnessing, I think you give so many just really good examples of everyone is witnessing it. And then we all have our own individual experiences with it, whether it's like run away or like meet it or like kind of approach it timidly, right? And that collective witness of that loss also needs that collective like grief healing as well, of like the coming together around it, because grief is also this collective experience, right? Like even though we all have our individual unique experiences
Right.
of it, right? It's like we need to come together too and have the people in our lives who are like, you're not living, or noticing that with us, or or do you want to talk about this, not just by yourself alone
Right.
in your journal, but like
Right.
together with other
Right.
people, right? Like it's
Yes.
like we need each other in it. And I think sometimes it can be like death and loss can be such an isolating thing and disorienting too. I think to your point around like the waves and the ocean and swimming, it's like so disorienting that
It is.
it's almost like we need these other people can also be anchors. Other
Yeah.
people can also, and like our belief system, God, like it can also be anchoring as well. And so you sort of grasp at whatever anchors you can, but you need that. It's like you need that collective coming together around the fact that you've all witnessed this loss. Yeah.
Definitely.
I have so many questions, and I think if I were to think about two of them, one, I'm wondering about like, I hear the difference between like really talking to your kids about grief, and I'm wondering if that also applies to like maybe the older ones, like that are the adolescents, if that's kind of similar. I'm wondering about that. And then I also want to swing back around to the sibling loss thing, because I think it's actually I don't want to lose that piece of like what happens with like a sibling, and how is that maybe different than like not being around your parents, or not you know, like than other types of loss.
Totally. Okay, I'll bring up the first one. As we were talking, one of the things that came to my mind is, even though like in the back of our mind, we all know that we are all going to die at some point. Like we all know that it hangs out somewhere in our vicinity. But I think when we see it in ourselves, it almost feels like a violation. And I know that's a very strong word to use, but it does. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to lose something that I love. That makes no sense. I refuse. And then you're like, I refuse this. I don't want it. But then you're staring at the empty chair. You're staring at like the people around you that are like dumbstruck about what happened. And then you're seeing this ripple effect. And everyone's like, wait a minute, this wasn't supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. And so I want to hold those two things to be true. Like two things can be true. It's like, yes, we all know that we're going to die. But two, it feels like a violation of what feels right to be human, is that we shouldn't have to lose in this kind of way. It doesn't feel right to our body. So when it happens, it will generally, I want to say, register as like an injustice, I want to say, to our system. And so whether you're an adult or whether you're a kid, I think it's worth noticing like, this doesn't feel right. Like, it just doesn't feel right. And so when I think about like kids, older kids, and it depends how they died, like, you know, suicide is a whole nother topic in and of itself. And I have worked with kids that have lost that way. And then there's the accidents that happen that you're like, oh no. And then there's like the chronic illness. Like it's all in different varying states. But I think to be open about it is like the first thing I would say. Like you can invite them depending on your relationship. But if you have a really good relationship with them, especially if it's your own child, you know, and it's a friend of theirs or even a teacher or their grandparent, or if it's, you know, their own parent or someone in their family, it's like, hey, this really big thing happened. And I know it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right for me, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't feel right for you. So like, let's just acknowledge that. Maybe we can talk about what about it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
What do we miss about having this person not here? What does it mean for you that they're not here anymore? And they may not have the words to say it in that exact moment, but it's something that they can keep returning to, because we're all dynamic people. We're all changing at different points. And so it may come up like at a birthday, or like they see something that's like a movie that they had wanted to watch with that person, but that person's not there. And then it's like, how does each unique individual interact with that grief? Are they going to be like, oh yeah, I know that person, they would have totally loved blah, 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 blah. Or you can ask them like, hey, if I see you having a hard time, do you want me to mention their name? Is that too hard for you? Or do you want to just like, I don't know, give me a signal that you need some extra comfort and love today? And you don't want to talk about it, but maybe you want like a warm cup of milk, or however, you know, they deal with it. Or like, just let me know that you're going through something. Because I think to the outside viewer, if we're in our grief state, it's not always really clear. So everyone around us is like, well, something's up with them today. Like, what bee bit them? And you're like, no, I'm just really sad and angry and angsty, and I can't even figure it out myself. And so, like, I think to assume, like, if there has been some ripple effect, to know, like, hey, let's, like, maybe check the waters a little bit. Because I think that's what the grieving person really needs. I think it's, I mean, I just remember after each loss that I had, it was like I didn't know what I needed. And when people are like, well, let me know if you need anything, it's like, well, I'm like, I don't really know what to tell you. I'm like, if you just were like, hey, I'm gonna just come and just like drop off some groceries, cool, I'll just send you a card. I'm not even gonna ask. I'm just gonna like send you a card. Or just like text you, hey, I'm here, can I take your kids for you? Like, I remember one of my friends, she had lost some friends that were really good to her, like really good friends with her. She lost both of them in a car accident, and she had like a very young kid with her. And I remember being like, you know what? Give me your kid. You haven't had any time to grieve. Process. I got him. It's okay. I can deal with, you know, a little infant. Just like take your 30 minutes and just do your thing. And she was like, thank you. Because just even that time to like sort ourselves out is, I feel like, so needed. So that's what I want to say about that. For sibling loss, I think that is such a topic I feel so near and dear to, just for myself personally. And then, you know, like I mentioned, I feel very strongly about the topic. The little boy that I think about is Elliot, who was only, I believe, 6. He might have just turned 7 when he lost. And his sister, he also has an older sister. And I just think about him and like what it's like to lose when you're really young. And then I think about what it's like to lose when you're like a young adult, and then what it's like to lose when you're an adolescent. And I think every stage is different. I think when you're really little, what I imagine is that your parents, they're deep in grief, and they're also trying to figure out how to support you as like the little kid. And it's complex because you're grieving when you're a parent, but you're also trying to be there for your kid. And then you're trying to explain to them like, what's it like to not have this little sibling that they're used to having. And I think for that kid, maybe what's hard for their parents to understand, and even as an adult kid, you know, adult sibling, it's like there is this balance, there's this rhythm to your family. And especially if it's a family member, like I knew that I could look at Bryant if my parents were going off about something or being, in their like ways. We would just like look at each other and be like, oh, they're being themselves again. And it kind of serves as this like what therapists like to call co-regulating kind of experience where you're like, well, that kind of feels weird to me. That kind of feels weird to you. But hey, we got each other. Okay, we're okay. But when it's just you, you're like, oh no, there's no one that's giving me the eye that's letting me know they also see what's happening and being my witness.
Yeah.
And know that they're with me in it. And even if you have other siblings, everyone deals with grief differently. So it also depends on the kind of relationship they had with their sibling, if they're close, if they're not close with them. And I think as you grow older, I think one of my young adults who lost, not young adult, an elementary school student that lost their brother, I think about their parents and they were trying to shield their daughter from, the loss and what it might look like. And I understand parents want to protect their kids, but I also think in that it's like there's some parts of loss and death you just can't protect your kid from. Yeah. Right? It's just painful. They know that sibling is just not going to be there anymore, and they have their own unique dynamic with them. And so to be like, hey, I know I'm sad, but like, tell me what it's like for you to not have your brother or your sister here. What responsibility do you now feel like you have? And I think what's really important when I think about younger kids, and what I mean by younger, I mean like younger than young adult. I know it's really hard, but I think, especially as an oldest daughter, you're like, I want to take care of my parents. I want to make sure they're okay. Maybe this is just an immigrant kid mentality, but it's like the collectivist. So like, we want to make sure our parents are okay, make sure everyone's okay. And we're just trying to like float the boat. And I think even when I think about my own kids, I have to tell them like, mommy is going to have some big feelings right now. And I'm really sad. And you can be here. I like hugs, but you are not responsible for my feelings. Like, you are not responsible for making it all better. Like, if you want to bring me a stuffy or you want to like give me a snug so my tears come out, that's great. But you do not have to do that. That is not your job. Because I think kids can feel burdened if they're like, this is my job. I must help my parent feel better. And if they can't, then they'll see it as part of their self-worth or like there's something that they can't do, and I don't want that for my kid. So like I think that's like a big star that I want to put like the best. I remember what my therapist said is like the best thing you can do for your kids is to be in your own therapy or to take care of yourself. And I was like, oh, that's just something they say, put your oxygen mask on. And then now I'm like, oh, actually I see that it's true, because a centered parent that can help, that their kid can reference point, I'm like, is a kid that will generally do better in situations of chaos. So I'm like, I get that. And then as a young adult who lost her sibling and as, now a parent, I'm like, it just hits so differently. And I'm an only sibling now. And so I think about like when my parents died, that's the end of my nuclear family story. Like all that storyline ends with me. There's no one else that I can be like, hey, remember when that happened? Because it just resides in my own memory. So I don't have any other counterpoints, which is like super sad to me. And I think also about that kind of loss when you're older and and if it's so fresh, I don't know if parents necessarily think their grown children need their parents still. And I tell my mom, I'm like, I still need you. My dad, I still need you. Like, I don't, just because I'm grown doesn't mean I don't want that comfort and stability, or, that day when you're just really sad and you want that comfort. So for my family, it looks like I'm having a bad day. They may not be able to say, I'm sorry, or I love you, or any of those things, but I'll probably get a really yummy home cooked meal. They're like, you can just come over, or like, we went to the store and we know you like tofu, and so I got you tofu, like one of those kind of things. And so I think that's the other big thing is like, if you're an adult that has lost a sibling and you see that your parents are grieving, like, know that it can be lonely because they're deep in their own grief, and it's okay to make you still want them and to tell them like, I need attention too. Yeah. And they may not be able to give it, but even be able to say that, I feel like is so important, because that's not always talked about either.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing just like maybe even some of the deep sadness of transitioning your own identity from being like eldest sibling to also only sibling is like
Yeah.
that's a big piece, you know? And I think they're also what struck me too, and coming back to kind of the beginning of our
Mm-hmm.
conversation around, you mentioned that your brother Bryant and you had conversations before he passed, and just curious. I'm curious how that helped you in your
Yeah.
grieving. I know that was like anticipatory grief was probably very present, but I'm
Yes.
curious in like after his passing, how those conversations were really helpful to you. I know for myself, I had similar
Mm-hmm.
conversations with my mom before she passed, and just the knowing of like, I know we kind of know that this is going to happen in the near future. We just don't know when. So we're going to have these what I call graveyard conversations. It's like the things I would
Yeah.
want to ask you at the graveyard, but I'm just going to
Right.
do it right now so that I
Yes.
can have some sort of answer, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I'm curious about what that was like for your own sibling bond to
Hmm.
be able to have those conversations. Yeah.
Thanks for asking that. I remember my parents' backyard being sitting with my brother with his like cannula oxygen mask, and we're just like sitting next to each other and just having these conversations. Or we're in his room, and then I'm like, oh, wait, you're never going to meet our kids. If we have kids, you're never going to be an uncle. And then I think there's a beauty in just being able to weep together about this thing that you wish you had been able to share that you no longer get to share. It's very powerful to do it when the person is still alive than after the fact. Like I can be like, wait, I cried with my brother that he wouldn't meet my kids. And it's so interesting because now like my kids know about Uncle Bryant. I mean, one of my sweet little boy. My middle one for my brother's last, I think it was his birthday. He like did some drawing and I'm like, what is he doing? And he drew a little laptop like with my brother's picture in it, I think. And he was like, I
Wow.
really wish that we could like have a FaceTime with each other and he could have met me. And then he cried. He was like, I wish he could have met me. And I was like, oh, son. I was like, I wish that too. And it's almost like this weird parallel where like I'm crying with my son who wishes he could have met his uncle, but I also cried with his uncle wishing he could have met my son. And it's like I'm holding these both experiences that kind of transcend time in a way, in a
Yeah.
very different kind of way. So I think it's very healing in that kind of aspect. I think it was also really helpful to vocalize like all the things that it's so funny like that we wanted to forgive each other for,
Wow. Yeah.
because there was things that I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had done that differently. And we kind of had this conversation where it was like, hey, remember this time when this happened? I'm really sorry that this happened. And I love that we were able to do that because I felt like when he passed, I could kind of clear, like, I didn't feel like there was anything that I didn't say. It was like
Yeah.
all these things that I was like, oh, I wish I was a better sister in this circumstance, or I'm sorry I checked out here, and he could do the same. Like, we were able to like talk about the things that
Wow.
we had wished that we had done. And I think something that not everyone talks about either, which was really important to me, and actually what I think has helped keep him alive in the best way I can, is his legacy. So I asked him, I was like, hey, Bryant, do you want to like, maybe write some letters or make a video, so your my children can see it. And he was just really upfront. He was like, no, I don't want to
Okay.
do that. And I
Oh.
was like, oh. I'm like, well, why not? I'm like, those are so memorable and I get to interact with you. And he goes, you know what, Melissa, like videos and like photos, they're just like little squares that are all like accumulated together, but that's like not all of me. He's like, how you keep me alive is like you talk about me and you tell stories about me, and you can show me like pictures and videos, but I'm not just pictures and videos. And I was like, oh, that's
Wow.
actually really wise. And he was 4 years
Yeah.
younger than me. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I have kept him alive by stories and
Yeah.
by like asking his friends. Now my kids are old enough, so they'll be like, can we hear stories about Uncle Bryant? And they'll all tell them stories, so they helped get to know a part of their uncle. So I really like that. And then there's this one conversation I remember us having two that really stick out in my mind. One, we were talking about his cat. So we have sibling cats. I have a cat and he has a cat, and that was like his therapy cat. And I remember we were walking once and I was like, well, what's Simba gonna do like when you die? Do you think like cats have feelings? And he's like, you know what, Melissa? I think Simba is gonna be like how everyone else is. I'm pretty sure he's gonna be sad for a while because he's gonna miss me, and you're gonna be sad too, and mom and dad are gonna be sad. And he's like, and then time will pass, and then you'll find your way to be happy again, and one day you will have a family you love as much as this one. And I was like, I don't believe you. And now when I look at my family, sometimes I like want to get all teary because I'm like, he was right.
Aww.
I love this family that I have. Yeah. And he's a part of it too. Like, I'm like, why couldn't I have him a part of it too? Like, I'm really mad about that. And it was right. Like, he almost spoke into existence what I didn't think was possible. Yeah. Like, at that time, I was like, there's no way I'm going to feel joy and happiness again. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just not possible. Because I'm so devastated. And he was like, you are going to be sad. And I am going to say, you will find happy and joy again. And you can still miss me. And so I think about that conversation that really sticks out of my mind as it started from the cat, but like also transferred to us. And then I think the other one that I want to think about kind of in dual, we did a family photo shoot. And the photographer, like, she captured different moments. And she was like, I want you to give a word to each of your family members as like a parting gift. And the word that he gave me was faith. And then I just remember crying. Like, I didn't prompt him. He gave me faith. And then I remember one of the conversations that we could have before he died, where he could still talk. This is before he couldn't talk anymore. Yeah. He was like, well, you know, Melissa, I give you faith. Or he was like, God is all that like I have left. He's like, I can't take my body, I can't take money. I didn't even get to achieve the things that most people get to do when they're 30. Like, he never had a girlfriend. Mm-hmm. He was just starting to like figure out what his career. He wanted to be a PT, like after like going in the movie industry. So he was just like starting to like figure himself out. And he's like, I can't take any of that with me. The only thing I can take with me into death is God. And he was like, that's what I hope you come to realize, is that God loves you, and that, you know, that's what gets to go with you, and that's it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of mad at God right now, but cool, you know, like, I'm sure, thanks for that. Yeah. But I still think about that as I'm trying to find my way back. Yeah. And I know I might have referenced earlier, like, when he died, I remember my mom asking for a sign, and I was like, maybe God will give me a sign, maybe not, because who knows. And I kid you not, we were with the hospice nurse. They call them in afterwards, and like, you know, you prepare the body. And my brother died with a like non-smile. Like, he just, when he died, like, we closed his eyes and then it was nothing. Yeah. I kid you not, like, after we had like prepared his body, put his clothes on, all the things, like, I looked and we were like, that is really weird. He had a slight smile on his face. I really wanted to take a picture of it. And like, everyone was like, this is sacred. Do not take your iPhone out. Like, this is not what Bryant would want. I'm like, okay, but I need it for photographic evidence for myself. They're like, some memories are just left in your mind. I'm like, okay, fine. But he literally had a slight smile. And I remember asking the hospice nurse about it and the other doctors, and they're like, no, we haven't seen anything like this before. Wow. And my mom was like, they're like, physically, it's not possible. When you die, like, you can't, your muscles don't just go into like a happy face. And it wasn't like a full-on tease, but it was like this like slight smile. And my mom was like, I think God told me he's got your brother.
Melissa, I honestly think, I mean, we have to wrap up, and I just think that is the best, honestly, ending for us to wrap up with, is just knowing that like your brother left you with that word faith, and then there was this like expression or this sign for you, and just is so, what a beautiful thing for you to be able to hold. In addition to, yes, you can be sad, but also you can experience joy and happiness, and also like to be able to, I don't know, be the person who's holding the bridge between like what I wish could happen, and then also what I wish could happen like from forward back. There's just so much, grief, but like healing and beauty in you through it.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate the ways in which you just like infuse all parts of your identities in it, of like, everything, eldest daughter, like immigrant daughter, like therapist, mom, all of the ways in which you've spoken to us today about grief and sibling loss, but also how to talk to kids about grief. There's so much wealth of knowledge, and I feel like you almost need to do a part two. There's just so much beautiful stuff for you that you've shared.
Thank you.
If our listeners wanted to connect with you, is that okay with you?
Yes, that is okay with me. And a real quick thing before we leave, the little nugget is I'm like, I didn't think I was this kind of person, but I'm like, look for the signs. I've heard that this is true for other people too.
Yeah.
But my brother loved Coca-Cola, like the Mexican Coca-Cola. Like it had to be that kind. And I kid you not, like I will, when I'm thinking about him sometimes, I'm like, I just really miss him. I will see a Coca-Cola truck, like drive on by.
See?
And I'm
for
like,
me, it's hummingbirds. So
I love it. And I'm like, I believe in it now. And I'm like, they're just trying to say hello. And I believe it because I asked him, I was like, will you please try to talk to me from heaven? He's like, I'll try. But now I'm like, I think this is it. And I'm okay with it. And if I get to heaven and I'm wrong, that's okay. But I'm like, I think it's a thing. So I'm like, please tell your listeners to like, look for the signs. Because if death is just a black hole and that's all there is, like that is just so like, and there's no connection. I just feel like that's just so despairing. Yeah. And maybe, and I'm not an optimist by any means. I wish I was. I am not. I'm kind of like a black horse, the dark horse that's kind of pessimistic, but has like maybe flashes of light of like glitter. I would say that's more like my internal perspective. But I'm like, I will go for the signs. Like I think that's just like a nice little snug. So I wanted to add that.
Appreciate you.
Yes.
And,
okay. So where they can find me?
They can find you at www.lithopsandbloomtherapy.com.
Yes. And Instagram, hopefully to follow, and maybe some Substack.
Beautiful.
It'll be in the notes.
It'll be in the show notes. Melissa, thank you so much for today. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Untethered to Rooted is produced and hosted by me, Dana Darty. Original music was composed and performed by the ever-talented Daniel Dickinson. Thanks so much to our guests for sharing with us today. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And follow us on social at Untethered to Rooted. And if you didn't like it, what podcast? Dana who? Until next time, take and give good care.